As most of you know, Alex Jones has been deemed guilty for defamation and is sentenced to pay around $1 billion. Initially, it was only $50 million, and then with the second suit, they added on $965 million onto that. So that is over $1 billion for what the jury says fair, just, and reasonable in damages. And this is a country that allegedly has free speech. Yeah, do you guys remember the Iraq War, where Dick Cheney said there's no doubt that Saddam Hussein now has weapons of mass destruction? There is no doubt he is amassing them to use against our friends, against our allies, and against us. This lie promoted by Dick Cheney caused over 1 million deaths, suffered a $0 penalty. Alex Jones says Sandy Hook was fake, caused 0 deaths. His penalty is over $1 billion. Remember, the largest fine paid by a banking executive responsible for the 2008 financial crisis was $67.5 million. And for comparison, Union Carbide only had to pay about half the amount for causing an environmental disaster that killed over 15,000 people. And I could go on for days here, but this affects all of us. This is essentially the system saying if you do anything that goes against our official narrative, we will financially ruin you. And we will have the audacity to say that it is fair and reasonable. They are setting a precedence. They are using him as an example. They are weaponizing feelings and emotions in order to destroy freedom of speech. I mean, love him or hate him, Alex Jones does stir things up a bit. I mean, he snuck into Bohemian Grove, took video footage of it, then confronted David Gergen, the man who was seated across from Klaus Schwab in that famous video where Schwab brags about penetrating governments. And Gergen basically admitted to the effigy ritual sacrifices that went down in Bohemian Grove. Of course, they just burned like an owl. Jones got it all on video, but it was just very weird to see these high-ranking globalists who are a part of the World Economic Forum practice these occult rituals. I mean, why doesn't Barack Obama get fined $1 billion? Don't you remember when he campaigned, he said, "We will end the forever wars." And everyone's like, oh, hell yeah, nice. The second he gets in, he's like, we're going to bomb kids, actually. Obama bombed hospitals, weddings, funerals. He dropped over 100,000 bombs on 7 different countries. He wasn't fined $1 billion. In fact, he was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. I mean, people really need to understand there's people in powerful positions that don't like how much power the average person has. Like Emmanuel Macron said recently, I don't like the word democracy because it gives the feeling that the people would have power. I mean, they're up in the ante. You guys have probably heard what happened recently with PayPal. They released a statement saying that they were going to fine users $2,500 if they posted misinformation on any social media platform. Of course, how do you define misinformation? Nobody knows. Just a blanket statement. Basically anything PayPal disagrees with. I, along with hopefully all of you, immediately deleted my PayPal account the second I heard this information. And that's why their stock has been plummeting recently. And because of that pushback, they walked back their statement, which shows if we give them resistance, we will have our freedoms retained. And I think another great form of resistance is just stop joining the United States military altogether. If you ever feel useless, remember it took 20 years, trillions of dollars, and 4 U.S. presidents to replace the Taliban with the Taliban. We need to show our leaders that we are not cannon fodder. We don't just join the military for the sake of joining the military. The people here will only join the military if we are given good leadership. And until that changes, boycott it. Like, why would anyone join the military when you look at Zelensky? He's refusing to sit down and have negotiations with Russia, and instead is accelerating his NATO membership, asking for more war, more lives lost, and is asking for more money from the United States. There's no sign of it slowing down. It's only escalating. Don't be sent to fight in some Slavic civil war, especially when you understand that the Western reporting of the special military operation is completely one-sided. You will never, ever find them conceding a single victory to Russia. 100% of the reporting discusses how well Ukraine is doing. Don't you find that a little bit suspicious? Like, I've been trying to find information on both sides. The Western media was extremely happy that Ukraine took back some small regions of farmland from the Russians that wasn't even really at the top of their priority list anyway. It was this huge PR victory. But I've heard reports that the whole reason they wanted to take back that unstrategic plot of land was for the PR that comes with it, and they lost around 30% of their ground troops in doing so. Of course, we cannot know for sure. We're not there. We're going off of propaganda from both sides. I'm just telling you what the other side is saying because CNN will certainly not tell you. I'm seeing credible reports that after the Crimean bridge attack, Putin completely destroyed their Starlink satellites, which they need to win this war. And that was just a little warning, a little reminder to show Ukraine what Russia's capable of, but they're trying to be strategic. And that retaliation they did only killed 11 people, which is terrible. No lives should be lost. But it's a stark difference from what the United States calls their shock and awe campaign, like what they did in the Battle of Fallujah. The United States has a strategy where they completely bomb and obliterate their enemy cities, and then they move in their tanks and their troops. Russia does not do that. Russia tries as hard as they can to keep the infrastructure of their invading territories intact because they're looking to take it over and return it to being a part of Russia again. All I'm saying is that it really looks like Russia's doing a lot better than it's being portrayed in the Western media. I mean, how Saudi Arabia has even stopped working with the United States in order to work with Russia instead. I mean, do you remember when Donald Trump visited the Saudis? And the one big takeaway was them, like, vibing over that weird orb. They're just pondering the orb together. They're getting along. Then the one takeaway Joe Biden gets from a meeting with the Saudis, I mean, the core press coverage was that really awkward fist bump he did with the Prince of Saudi Arabia. And then after that, the Saudis have no respect for Biden, so they told everyone on the world stage that Biden awkwardly tried to give them a quid pro quo, as in something for something, as in to keep their oil deals that they have until after the midterm elections. So Biden was only concerned about the oil prices staying low before the midterms. That's all he cares about. Of course, the Saudis have no respect for Biden. They did not honor this, and then they told on him to the world stage, mocking him, because he is a joke. And he is by far the creepiest president we've ever had in the history of the United States. Like this Ashley Biden diary entry, where she said, "I was so afraid of him coming in the shower with me that I waited until late at night to take a shower." I mean, this is allegedly what she wrote. If it was any other president, I would be more skeptical. But just from viewing Biden's actions on the world stage, of him just being the creepiest human being on earth, I can see him doing this. This completely fits with his character. Like, he's always weirdly kissing her on the lips when she's way too old for that, in my opinion. It's utter clown world. It's insane. So yeah, people are leaving the Democratic Party in droves. One example of that being Tulsi Gabbard. She recently left the Democrats to join the Republicans, she said. And I like Tulsi. There's just one suspicious thing about her, and that's that her picture can be found on the World Economic Forum's website. Finally, someone has confronted her about this, and she has answered so many of our questions. Someone asked her on Twitter, "Why are you a part of the World Economic Forum?" Tulsi responds, "I'm not." He says, "You were featured as one of the young leaders of the World Economic Forum," and she responds, "They put my picture on their site without asking, never had anything to do with them." I'm inclined to believe her. There might be a few of you who saw my video on Jeffrey Epstein and the Lifeboat Foundation, which was some NGO think tank that devises ways to survive a nuclear Armageddon. They devise ways to fix the climate. It composes of scientists and entrepreneurs. And Jeffrey Epstein was listed as a member, and I had an interview with the founder of the Lifeboat Foundation, who admitted that Jeffrey Epstein was not actually a member, and they somewhat inflate their numbers a bit. This seems to be a trend amongst NGOs. I mean, they even list Putin as part of the World Economic Forum when he's the one who's, like, completely at odds with them militarily. So yeah, at the same time as Alex Jones being persecuted, Kanye West is also under fire right now for voicing his opinion, to the point where JP Morgan has kicked out the Ye empire. And Kanye said, "I gave JP Morgan $145 million and they treated me like shit. How do you think they're treating you?" And JP Morgan kept Jeffrey Epstein as a client, despite the internal warnings they received. So this isn't about them being good people, just trying to do the right thing. I mean, yeah, ousted Barclays CEO Jess Stanley backed up Epstein at JP Morgan. But yeah, a lot of random people are seeing through the facade and they're standing up. And some of them are high profile, like MIA, the paper airplanes girl. She tweeted, "If Alex Jones pays for lying, shouldn't every celebrity pushing V's pay too?" And of course, right after she did this, she lost some business deals, lost a bunch of money. And the response is quick. That's why you don't see a lot of celebrities speak up on these things, because they immediately get the platform, they lose their money. Can you imagine how many celebrities actually think like this but don't say anything? Like, we are not a minority. I mean, people who think this way. People are just sick of this corruption and this stupid spending by these WEF politicians like Justin Trudeau. Like, for example, Canada recently paid $54 million for some basic app, and a programmer duplicated the ArriveCan app in only 2 days. This is textbook corruption. Like, where does that money go? And then we look over at Biden, who's just printing fiat money to the point where other countries are no longer taking the petrodollar seriously. Our money isn't backed up by anything. Russia, on the other hand, has an abundance of natural resources that they're tapping into, and that's why the Saudis are siding with them. That's why there's an entire Eastern Bloc developing outside of the Western Bloc's SWIFT payment system. SWIFT is what allows, like, Brazil to trade their money with Canada. But the Chinese made their own version of this called CIPS, and all these Eastern Bloc companies are moving over to that, from Saudi Arabia to Iran to Russia. And now there's a competitor on the world stage because nobody wants to work with the United States, who just arbitrarily prints this fiat money and calls themselves the king. It's not a fair environment to do business in. Our money's backed by nothing. It's like playing Monopoly against someone who just has a bag of endless paper money for themselves. And that's why Saudi Arabia has said publicly they are no longer taking the US dollar. And that, I can't stress enough how huge that is. The US dollar is based on petro, which is mostly given to us by Saudi Arabia. And Biden dropped the ball so hard, but you don't hear about it in the Western media because they're constantly covering for him. You have to go to channels like mine that have less than 2,000 subscribers to hear this information, to get a warning of what's about to come. Mainstream news is not going to warn you. Mainstream news will tell you that Alex Jones having to pay over $1 billion is a just and fair settlement and that the system still works. Newsflash, it no longer works.